Welcome back to the Mintner Method. I'm your host, Andrew Mintner, and on today's episode, I'm going to dive into the Arizona State versus Texas State matchup in Week 3. So this is a new format I'm trying. I'm doing a video, and then the audio will be released in podcast form. But I felt like the video would be a little bit more informative to kind of show you the statistics and how I group them, and so you can have a visual aid to the analysis. Now, I have to say, pretty funny. I've never done a video before, and so this is like my second take because I felt like I had a really good take on the first one, and I didn't hit the microphone. So, so bear with me. I'm sorry. So first things first, the analysis. Kind of going into this, as you can see, we're looking at some advanced statistics here. We have offensive points per attempt. Or predicted points per attempt, excuse me. And then you have offensive explosiveness, offensive stuff rate, which is if a running back is tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage, so stuffed. And then you have offensive line yards, which is essentially an offensive line metric. The higher the ranking, the more the yards, the more work the offensive line does, so better. Offensive front seven havoc allowed. So, that's allowing pressures, tackles for losses, things like that. Then you have your offensive rushing, predicted points per attempt, and then offensive passing. So these are just pretty basic to start. And the predicted points per attempt, that's more of like an efficiency measure. So it's like EPA, which you've heard me talk about before in great detail. So that really kind of just gives us a baseline. Now, we don't have a large sample size for these teams, but these rankings, they take away garbage time and things of that nature. So it's more of a concrete look at it versus just like an overall points per game or attempts per game or things like that. So I always like to look at it from an efficiency standpoint because it makes for a better analysis. So we'll jump right in. The first thing that really sticks out to me is going to be the offensive and defensive line matchup from Arizona State to Texas State. So stuff rate 23rd overall. This number right here is a percentage, so it's 9.7%. And then you have offensive line yards, 18th overall, front seven allowed, 16th overall. And then, so when we look at the defensive side of it, Texas State, first off, dead last in explosiveness allowed. Now, this is an extremely small sample size because they played Lamar and UTSA. But that is something to hone in on. They only won by 7 against Lamar, which was nerve-wracking to say the least, as someone who really liked Texas State in the preseason. But when I look at the defensive line yards and the defensive stuff rate, this is just a strength on weakness type viewpoint. And this is kind of really the narrative when you look at Power 4/Power 5 teams against a group of 5 teams, right? It's not really the always the talent that is overcoming. It's more of a depth issue. And so the thing is, there's talented players on Texas State, no doubt. But there's just more depth and more talent overall on Arizona State. And they just have more, guys they can rotate in and out, in and out. That type of recruit, it's just not it's not in the group of 5, unfortunately. There's some really good group of 5 guys. They're going to make the NFL. They're going to do great. But the next up is not that, whereas when you see these rotating defenses and rotating, skill player position, it's not that. And that's the biggest difference. And so when we look here, obviously Arizona State's not really a threat passing the ball. Anybody who watched either of the games knows that. And this havoc total here for Texas State is pretty good. 43%, that is quite unsustainable. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, but that is something to keep an eye on going down the road. This right here, though, not good. 107th in defensive rushing efficiency. That's not going to cut it against this team. And, to be unbiased, we'll look at the other side of the ball. Texas State really hasn't shown anything great outside of a decent ranking, 28th in offensive line yards, to kind of write home about how how they're like faring, right? This right here, though, front seven havoc allowed, is concerning to me. And again, it plays right back into the things I literally was just talking about, which is a depth thing. So this is a solid Arizona State team. And the thing that's more eye-opening to me is simply Arizona State has played two Division I teams, which is rare out the gate. Normally, the first couple weeks, you're playing like a Division II team, like a layup basically, right? You're playing East Baptist Jesus State College or something, trying to win 75-0 and just get your guys out there, right? And then you play a Division I team and then like whatever, right? I mean, Wyoming and Mississippi State, neither are world beaters, neither are expected to compete in their conference really, but that does say a decent amount that they handled them pretty easily. The Mississippi State score is a lot less. So it's more misleading than anything. They were dominating that entire game. And that's one thing to come back to. Mississippi State obviously is a middling to lower SEC team. They're not expected to, really compete in the conference. But again, they are an SEC team. If you put Mississippi State, this team, in the Sun Belt, they would be favored to win the Sun Belt. Like that needs to kind of be like taken into the analysis, right? So a couple things else, I want to make sure we're not missing anything. We'll look at the returning production. And as you can see, Arizona State right here, 67th in offensive returning production, 46th in defensive returning production. And they're coming from middling units. They're not expected to be, again, world beaters. Their win total at the beginning of the year was only 4.5. So again, there's not a lot of expectations. And when we go down to Texas State, the handicap, which, in the preseason I still feel this way, was that I felt like they would win the Sun Belt. And the reason is they have a very good offensive team, and they brought in James Madison, transfer Jordan McLeod, who is the best quarterback in the Sun Belt. You can argue it or debate it, but you're wrong. So it's just that. And then they were going to have an improved defensive unit. But they're just trying to improve to the average because, they're trying to win that conference. And in this matchup, that really shows just in their first couple games where, they were facing not really great competition. UTSA, even though that was a close spread, they're not expected to compete really at all this year. Their returning production profile, if I remember correctly, pretty low. They don't have Frank Harris, who was there 7 years as a quarterback. So that's kind of what is eye-opening to me. Now, the line is only 1.5, so that's kind of like am I square? Am I missing something here? And it feels that way. And yes, they are playing in Texas State. This is the biggest game, arguably, for Texas State. They do not get a ton of, Power 4 or 5 opponents where it's expected to be a competitive game environment. That's just not the case. They just don't get that a lot. So they're going to be up for this game. It's on a Thursday. So, I'm sure the crowd is going to be crazy. I just don't see them being able to hold up four quarters against this physical offense. And I just think that's going to be the difference, as it usually is in these matchups that are supposed to be closely contested. And I just see Arizona State running away with it and pretty much dominating the physicality of the game. So that's going to be it for this episode / video. This is a new format I'm going to try and see how it works out. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I feel like it gives you more of a visual aid, so you can kind of see with what I'm working with, instead of just rattling off these statistics where you're probably like, wow, this guy will not shut up, So kind of gives you a little bit more of a visual take on it. So as always, if you have any comments, concerns, or suggestions for new material or topics to cover, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. You can email me at themintnermethod@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on the video. It's going to be on YouTube. And that's pretty much it. So as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.